Billionaire mocked black waitress in Arabic. Seconds later she answered back fluently. The late afternoon sun painted golden streaks across the windows of the Sterling Grove, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants where a single meal could cost more than most people made in a week. The place breathed money from every corner, with its crystal chandeliers casting rainbow patterns on pristine white tablecloths, leather chairs that seemed to embrace you like expensive clouds, and servers who moved with the practiced grace of ballet dancers. It was the kind of place where deals worth millions were sealed over aged wine, where celebrities dined behind privacy screens, and where the very air seemed to whisper that you needed to belong here, really belong, to even step through those mahogany doors. That Tuesday afternoon, the restaurant hummed with its usual symphony of quiet luxury, silverware touching fine china with delicate clinks, ice cubes settling in crystal glasses, and the soft murmur of conversations that shaped the city's future. Among the servers gliding between tables was Maya Thompson, a woman whose presence commanded attention not through loudness but through an unmistakable dignity that seemed to radiate from her very core. She carried herself with the kind of grace that couldn't be taught in any hospitality school, her movements fluid and purposeful, her uniform pressed to perfection, and her natural hair styled in an elegant updo that framed her face beautifully. Maya had been working at the Sterling Grove for 3 years, and in that time, she had served governors, movie stars, tech moguls, and old money aristocrats, treating each with the same professional courtesy whether they acknowledged her humanity or treated her like part of the furniture. She had learned to read people quickly, to anticipate needs before they were voiced. To navigate the complex dance of high-end service where being invisible and indispensable simultaneously was an art form. But nothing in her years of experience had quite prepared her for the man who would walk through those doors that afternoon, a man whose arrogance would soon collide with a truth he never saw coming, creating a moment that would ripple through the entire restaurant and change everyone who witnessed it. Hassan al-Rashid entered the Sterling Grove like he owned not just the restaurant but the very ground it stood on, his presence immediately shifting the atmosphere in that subtle way that extreme wealth often does. He was dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, custom-tailored to perfection, with a watch on his wrist that caught the light with every movement, broadcasting its obscene price tag without saying a word. Behind him trailed 2 younger men, clearly associates or assistants, who seemed to orbit around him like planets around the sun, their body language screaming deference and fear in equal measure. The host practically tripped over himself to seat them at the best table, the one by the window overlooking Central Park, where the view alone was worth a small fortune. Hassan settled into his chair with the kind of casual arrogance that suggested the world existed solely for his convenience, his dark eyes scanning the room with an expression that evaluated everything and found it barely adequate. When Maya approached their table with her usual warm professionalism, menu in hand and welcoming smile in place, Hassan's gaze swept over her with the kind of dismissive assessment that made it clear he saw her as nothing more than a prop in his dining experience, perhaps even less than that. "Good afternoon, gentlemen, welcome to the Sterling Grove," Maya said, her voice carrying that perfect blend of warmth and professionalism that she had perfected over the years, neither too familiar nor too distant. "My name is Maya, and I'll be taking care of you today. Can I start you with some water, perhaps sparkling or still?" Hassan didn't even look at her face, his eyes remaining fixed on his phone as he waved a dismissive hand in her direction, the gesture so casually contemptuous it might have been directed at a fly. "Sparkling, room temperature, not too much ice," he commanded in accented English, his tone suggesting these were orders to be followed, not requests to be considered. Maya nodded, making a mental note while maintaining her composure, though something in his tone had already set off warning bells in her mind, the kind that years of service had taught her to recognize. As Maya turned to leave, Hassan leaned toward his associates and spoke in Arabic, his voice carrying just enough for her to hear, though he clearly assumed she wouldn't understand a word. "Look at her, pretending to be sophisticated in this place," he said, his Arabic flowing with the casual cruelty of someone who had never been challenged. "They'll hire anyone these days, even let them serve at the best tables. In Dubai, she'd be lucky to clean the floors." His associates shifted uncomfortably, one of them glancing nervously at Maya's retreating form. But neither dared to contradict their boss. The younger one, barely out of college by the looks of him, forced a weak laugh that sounded more like a cough, while the older associate suddenly found his napkin fascinating, folding and refolding it with intense concentration. Maya heard every word, understanding each syllable with perfect clarity, but her step never faltered, her expression never changed. She had learned long ago that the best revenge against ignorance wasn't always immediate confrontation but choosing the perfect moment to reveal the truth. She walked to the service station, prepared their water with meticulous care, and took a moment to center herself, drawing on the strength her grandmother had always told her she possessed, the kind that came from knowing exactly who you were regardless of what anyone else thought. When she returned to the table, Hassan was deep in conversation with his associates, still in Arabic, his voice growing more animated as he gestured broadly. The problem with America, he was saying, is they give these people too much freedom, let them think they're equal to us. Money should mean something, should create proper boundaries. He paused as Maya set down the water, not acknowledging her presence, then continued, look at her, probably thinks she's important because she works in an expensive restaurant. She doesn't understand that serving the wealthy doesn't make you wealthy, doesn't make you worthy of respect. Maya carefully placed each glass, her hand steady despite the fire building in her chest, her professional mask firmly in place even as his words tried to chip away at her dignity. The orders were taken with Hassan barely glancing up from his phone, barking his requirements in English this time with such specific demands that it was clear he was trying to make her job difficult, requesting modifications to dishes that the chef would certainly resist, temperature specifications that bordered on the absurd, and timing requirements that would challenge even the most experienced kitchen. His associates ordered quietly, almost apologetically, as if trying to balance out their boss's rudeness with their own subdued politeness, though neither had the courage to actually be genuinely kind. Maya wrote everything down with practiced efficiency, repeating each order back with perfect accuracy, which seemed to irritate Hassan more than any mistake would have. As she left to place their orders, Hassan's Arabic commentary resumed, this time even more pointed and personal. You can dress them up, put them in uniforms, teach them to speak properly, but you can't change what they are, he said, his voice dripping with a contempt that seemed to come from somewhere deep and ugly. She probably goes home to some tiny apartment, tells herself she's making it in New York, not realizing she's just a servant with a different title. The African Americans here, they don't understand their place in the world, don't understand that some people are meant to serve and others are meant to be served. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud, making even his associates visibly uncomfortable, though still neither found the courage to speak up. The younger one stared intently at his water glass, while the older one cleared his throat several times as if preparing to say something but never quite managing it. Other diners nearby, though they couldn't understand the Arabic, could sense the negative energy emanating from Hassan's table, the way his tone carried arrogance and cruelty even without translation. Maya stood at the kitchen pass, waiting for the appetizers, her mind racing not with hurt but with strategy, knowing that the moment for truth was approaching, that soon Hassan would learn a lesson about assumptions and respect that he would never forget. 20 minutes later, Maya returned with their appetizers, each plate a work of art that the kitchen had prepared despite their irritation at Hassan's modifications. She served with the same grace she always displayed, but this time, there was something different in her bearing, a subtle shift that Hassan, in his arrogance, failed to notice. As she placed his plate before him, adjusting it to the perfect angle as was the restaurant standard, Hassan spoke again in Arabic to his associates, not even lowering his voice. The way she walks, like she owns the place, it's almost amusing. Someone should tell her that serving expensive food doesn't make you expensive yourself. She's still just a black waitress, nothing more, nothing less, no matter how much she pretends otherwise. The words were meant to wound, to diminish, to reduce her to nothing more than her race and her job, weapons of humiliation that he wielded with the casual cruelty of someone who had never faced consequences. But Maya had heard enough. She finished placing the last plate, stepped back to the perfect service distance, and then, in flawless, elegant Arabic that carried the refined accent of someone who had learned the language not just functionally but beautifully, she spoke. Sir, I hope the temperature of your appetizer is to your exact specifications. After all, someone of your obvious refinement surely deserves perfection, even if your manners suggest otherwise. The words fell into the space between them like a thunderclap on a clear day. Hassan's fork, which had been halfway to his mouth, stopped in mid-air, his eyes widening in shock that quickly morphed into something close to panic. His associates both froze, the younger one's mouth actually falling open in undisguised amazement, while the older one's eyes darted between Maya and Hassan like he was watching a tennis match he couldn't quite believe was happening. The tables nearby, though most didn't understand Arabic, could feel the seismic shift in the atmosphere, the sudden tension that crackled like electricity through the air. Hassan's face went through a series of transformations, from shock to embarrassment to anger and back to shock again, as if his brain couldn't quite process what had just happened, couldn't reconcile the woman he had dismissed so thoroughly with the one now standing before him, speaking his language with more elegance than he had displayed all afternoon. You speak Arabic?" Hassan finally managed to stammer, his voice having lost all its earlier authority, reduced to something small and uncertain. Maya maintained her professional smile, but her eyes held a strength that made it clear she would no longer be dismissed or diminished. Fluently, she replied, still in Arabic, her pronunciation perfect, her tone controlled but carrying an edge of steel. "Every word you've said since you sat down, every insult you thought was private, every racist comment you believed was safe because you assumed I was too ignorant to understand. I heard it all, understood it all, and chose to wait for the right moment to let you know that your assumptions about people, particularly about black women, are not just wrong but embarrassingly shallow." She switched to English then, her voice carrying clearly through the now quiet restaurant section. "I speak 5 languages, Mr. Al-Rashid. Yes, I know who you are, I recognized you the moment you walked in. I have a master's degree in international relations from Columbia University, which I'm sure you'd find surprising given your assumptions about my intelligence. I work here not because I have no other options, but because I'm paying off student loans while studying for my PhD in Middle Eastern Studies at night. My dissertation, ironically enough, is on the economic relationships between the Gulf states and America, which means I probably understand your business dealings better than you'd be comfortable knowing." The silence that followed was deafening. Hassan's carefully constructed world, where money and race created clear hierarchies, where he stood comfortably at the top looking down at everyone else, had just crumbled around him. His associates stared at Maya with a mixture of admiration and second-hand embarrassment for their boss, while other diners had given up any pretense of not watching, some even putting down their phones after clearly recording what was happening. "My grandmother," Maya continued, her voice softer now but no less powerful, "taught me that knowledge is the ultimate power, that education is the one thing no one can ever take away from you. She also taught me to let ignorant people reveal themselves fully before showing them the mirror of their own prejudice. You've revealed yourself completely today, Mr. Al-Rashid, and what everyone here has seen isn't the successful billionaire you want them to see, but a small, insecure man who needs to diminish others to feel important." Hassan's hands trembled slightly as he reached for his water glass, his throat suddenly dry, his mind racing for something, anything to say that might salvage the situation. But what could he say? How could he deny words that dozens of people had heard, attitudes that he had displayed so openly, prejudices that he had worn like badges of honor? His younger associate finally found his voice, speaking quietly in Arabic. "She's right, Hassan. This is shameful." The older associate nodded, adding in English for everyone to hear, "We should apologize and leave." But Hassan's pride, that mountain of ego built on wealth and privilege, wouldn't let him back down so easily. "You think you're clever," he said to Maya, his voice trying to recapture some of its earlier arrogance but failing miserably. "You think embarrassing me makes you special? You're still just a waitress, regardless of your degrees." Maya's response was calm and devastating. "And you're still just a customer, regardless of your billions. The difference is, I treat every customer with respect until they prove they don't deserve it. You've proven that beyond any doubt. You see, Mr. Al-Rashid, money might buy you a lot of things, but it clearly hasn't bought you class, humanity, or basic decency. Those things can't be purchased, they have to be learned, and you've obviously skipped those lessons in your rush to accumulate wealth." The manager had appeared by this point, a dignified woman named Patricia who had been watching from the service station, waiting to see if she needed to intervene. She stood beside Maya, her presence a clear statement of support. "Is there a problem here?" Patricia asked, though her tone suggested she knew exactly what the problem was and who had caused it. Hassan looked around the restaurant, seeing the faces all turned toward him, some with phones still recording, others shaking their heads in disgust. His carefully maintained image, the projection of power and success he worked so hard to cultivate, was crumbling in real time, and there was nothing his money could do to stop it. "We were just leaving," Hassan muttered, standing abruptly, his movement knocking over his water glass, the contents spreading across the pristine tablecloth like his reputation spreading across social media. As Hassan and his associates hurried toward the exit, trying to escape the weight of all those judging eyes, Maya called out one more time, her voice clear and strong. "Mr. Al-Rashid," she said, causing him to pause at the door. "The title of your story today is, 'Billionaire Mocked Black Waitress' in Arabic." Seconds later she answered back fluently. "I hope you remember it, because everyone else here will." The door closed behind them with a soft whoosh, and for a moment, the restaurant remained silent. Then, starting from a table in the corner and spreading throughout the room like wildfire, applause began. It started with one person clapping slowly, then another, until the entire restaurant was applauding Maya, some even standing in a show of respect and solidarity. An elderly woman at a nearby table reached out and touched Maya's arm gently. "That was magnificent, dear," she said, her eyes misty with emotion. "Absolutely magnificent." A younger man, who had been dining alone and filming the entire encounter, approached her respectfully. "Ma'am, I hope you don't mind, but I recorded that. With your permission, I'd like to share it. People need to see this, need to understand that racism and prejudice have no place in our society, no matter how much money someone has." Maya nodded, knowing that the story would spread, that Hassan's humiliation would follow him, but more importantly, that maybe, just maybe, it would make others think twice before making assumptions based on race or profession. Patricia, the manager, pulled Maya aside. "Take a break," she said kindly. "And for what it's worth, I'm promoting you to head server, effective immediately. We need more people like you in leadership positions here." As Maya walked to the break room, her phone already buzzing with messages from co-workers who had heard what happened, she thought about her grandmother, who had passed away 2 years ago but whose strength still lived in her. "You were right, Grandma," she whispered. "Knowledge is power, and dignity is priceless." The aftermath of that Tuesday afternoon rippled far beyond the Sterling Grove's walls. The video went viral within hours, shared millions of times across every social media platform, with hashtags like #MayaThePolyglot and #RespectIsEarned trending globally. News outlets picked up the story, with headlines screaming about the billionaire who learned a harsh lesson about prejudice and assumptions. Hassan al-Rashid's companies saw their stock prices dip as investors distanced themselves from the scandal, and several major deals he had been negotiating fell through as partners decided they didn't want to be associated with someone whose values were so publicly exposed as toxic. But more importantly, Maya's story inspired thousands of others to share their own experiences, to stand up against discrimination, to refuse to be diminished by those who thought money or race or position gave them the right to treat others as less than human. Letters poured into the restaurant from people around the world, thanking Maya for her courage, for her dignity, for showing that sometimes the most powerful response to hatred isn't violence or anger, but truth delivered with precision and grace. Scholarship offers came from universities, job offers from international corporations who wanted someone with her language skills and obvious intelligence, speaking engagements from organizations fighting discrimination. But Maya chose to stay at the Sterling Grove, at least for a while. Continuing her PhD studies, now with a full scholarship that had materialized after her story went viral. She used her platform to speak about education, about the importance of never making assumptions, about the dignity of all work and all people. Hassan al-Rashid, for his part, issued a public apology through his publicist, though it rang hollow to most who read it. His associates, however, both quietly resigned from his company, the younger one later reaching out to Maya to apologize personally and to thank her for the lesson she had taught not just to Hassan but to him as well. He wrote, "You showed me that real strength isn't about putting others down but about lifting yourself up through knowledge and dignity." I'll never forget that lesson. 6 months later, Maya was invited to speak at the United Nations during a conference on discrimination and workplace dignity. She stood at the podium, looking out at delegates from around the world, and began her speech with the words that had become famous: "When someone mocks you in a language they think you don't understand, remember that your response isn't just for them but for everyone who has ever been dismissed, diminished, or discriminated against." The story of that afternoon became a case study in business schools, a teaching moment in diversity workshops, a rallying cry for those fighting against prejudice in all its forms. Restaurant workers from around the world shared their own stories of discrimination, finding courage in Maya's example. The Sterling Grove itself changed, implementing new policies to protect workers from harassment, creating a fund to help employees pursue education, and becoming known not just for its expensive menu but for its commitment to dignity and respect for all. Maya completed her PhD, her dissertation drawing partly on her experience and examining how economic privilege often reinforces racial and social prejudices. She continued working at the restaurant part-time while teaching at Columbia, bringing real-world experience to academic theory. She never forgot that Tuesday afternoon, not because of the pain Hassan had tried to inflict, but because of the power she had discovered in speaking truth to prejudice. Years later, when asked about the incident in an interview for a documentary about discrimination in the service industry, Maya reflected, "People often ask me if I was angry, if I wanted revenge. But the truth is, I felt sorry for him. Imagine going through life so insecure that you need to diminish others to feel valuable. Imagine having all that money but being so poor in spirit that you can't see the humanity in someone serving you food. That's not success, that's tragedy. Real success is treating everyone with dignity, regardless of their position. Real wealth is in the connections we make, the respect we show, the kindness we spread." Mr. Al-Rashid had billions but was bankrupt in all the ways that truly matter. The documentary ended with footage from that day, the moment when Maya responded in perfect Arabic, the shock on Hassan's face, the applause that followed. But more importantly, it showed the impact, the thousands of messages from workers who had found their voice, who had stood up to discrimination, who had refused to be diminished. It showed that sometimes, the most powerful revolution doesn't come from the top down but from someone simply refusing to accept disrespect, someone standing in their truth, someone showing that dignity isn't determined by the job you do but by the character you display. Today, there's a small plaque in the Sterling Grove, placed there by the owner after the incident, that reads, "Respect is the currency that matters most in this establishment. Dignity is required of all who enter, regardless of their station. Prejudice will not be served here." Maya still works there occasionally, though she's now Dr. Maya Thompson, a respected professor and author. But she keeps the job, she says, to remember where she came from, to stay connected to the community of workers who keep the city running, and to ensure that if another Hassan al-Rashid walks through those doors, they'll learn the same lesson about assumptions and respect. The title of that story remains the same, echoing through time as a reminder: "Billionaire mocked black waitress in Arabic, seconds later she answered back fluently." It's a title that captures not just a moment of confrontation but a universal truth about human dignity, about the danger of assumptions, about the power of knowledge, and about the importance of treating every single person with the respect they deserve simply by virtue of being human. Because in the end, that's what Maya's story really teaches us, that no amount of money can buy you the right to diminish another person's humanity, and no job, no matter how humble it might seem to some, diminishes the worth of the person doing it. We are all more than our jobs, more than our bank accounts, more than the assumptions others make about us. And sometimes, it takes just one person standing up, speaking out, refusing to be diminished, to remind the whole world of that fundamental truth. The ripples from that Tuesday afternoon continue to spread, touching lives, changing minds, opening hearts, because Maya Thompson did more than just answer back in Arabic. She answered back for everyone who has ever been mocked, marginalized, or mistreated, and she did it with such grace and power that the echo of her words will never be forgotten.